rodeo with a guy that I think has become the most beloved retired teacher in the Central Virginia community, and Bill Mooncachi.
Mooncachi, yep.
Mooncachi. And he's just an all-around A-plus guy. The first time he was on the show, we had a dozen people that were watching the program encourage him to run for school board.
Well, we'll see.
He is now a software developer. He spent 12 years in public schools. And I think the interview we did, and the show will start here in a matter of moments. We're just kind of tapping people on the shoulder. The interview we did with Bill the first time, I thought was authentic, straightforward, factual, easy to understand. The topic matter was concerning. It resonated with parents. It showcased challenges that needed to be overcome. And frankly, a lot of people don't realize this, but Bill darn near had me in tears personally hosting the show with his commitment to transparency and honesty and the children that he taught over a 12-year career in Fluvanna and Albemarle County Public Schools. I just was so moved with the authenticity of the gentleman sitting across from us. So today is the second round of that interview. And you, the viewer and listener, it's an opportunity for you to learn about a number of topics that I think are somewhat new terms. For example, the term de-leveling, but a topic that's quickly become more of our vocabulary, more a part of our vocabulary, especially with parents that follow schools closely. So give the show a like and a share anywhere you are watching. We see a number of folks watching in Crozet, a number of folks watching in Earlysville. We see a number of folks watching in Keswick, downtown Charlottesville, with a number of folks right now. Our heat map is showcasing quite a few people in Lynchburg, in Northern Virginia, certainly in Keswick here. Virginia Beach, Norfolk is in the house. Give the show a like and a share. We will encourage your participation with comments in the feed, which we will relay live on air. The program airs across 15 Facebook pages, 15 Twitter accounts, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Snapchat, the Fountain app. I mean, every social media platform known to mankind. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Judah, things are looking good here. We can rock and roll, sir, when you're ready. Guys, good Wednesday afternoon. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. It's a pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille network, where our audience is Charlottesville, Central Virginia, Commonwealth country, and worldwide. Today, we're presented by Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. Dr. Wagner and his team undoubtedly have your back. Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. Folks, today's show I am very much excited for. We have an individual on set that epitomizes everything that is pure about education, public school education. I will let him do the introductions here in a matter of moments, but I encourage anyone that's going to watch this interview to very much check out the interview we did, let's say about three to 4 weeks ago, where Mr. Bill Mooncachi was authentic, genuine, heartfelt, straightforward, unafraid, frank, critical with his analysis, but in a way that encouraged positive performance after understanding the issues we need to digest. I think that was his mission the last time. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Why don't we go to the studio camera and welcome Bill to the show. I have been pumped for this. Was talking about you at the breakfast table with my wife. Had conversations with multiple people about you. As you said in kind of the pre-production conversation, a lot to live up to after the first interview.
Yep.
but I think you certainly will. Thank you for joining us, Bill.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Jerry.
Our pleasure. For those that don't know you, introduce yourself to everyone that's watching.
Yeah, my name's Bill Munkachi. I taught for 12 years in a variety of public schools. One being the most recent being Albemarle County Public Schools at Albemarle High School as a math teacher there, and at Fluvanna County High School as well for 5 years there. I've taught in Los Angeles Unified School District back in California, and Beaufort as well. I recently left the profession and kind of went into details about that in the previous interview. And I am, trying to make a positive way forward for my life and my family. I'm moving into software development. So
I'm going to follow your lead. The first topic we've kind of touched on in the pre-production conversation was de-leveling. And it's a term that has become more ubiquitous and parental language and vocabularies. But I think it's a term that's not truly understood. De-leveling and the essence of what it is.
Basically it's, I guess we should talk about how things were done traditionally too, but desorting, keeping all students in, not having honors classes, or AP, they'd have AP, but not having honors classes and just keeping all kids in the same room, not having kind of remedial courses, not tracking students over the years. So it's kind of, it would mean in 8th grade, every single 8th grade math student would be in 8th grade math if it's truly de-leveled, which, that's kind of the extreme version. That's definitely not what's happening in Albemarle County. Not yet, maybe, but it's not happening. They do have honors classes still and AP classes still. Those are just opt-in. So prior to, I guess, 2020, students would have recommendations from teachers, and that would be part of how the decision was made where to place students. Now that is, de-emphasized, to say the least, and teacher recommendations do not need to happen in order for a kid to be placed in an honors class. So essentially, in the Albemarle County version, students can choose to be in whatever classroom they want, which sounds okay. But yeah, the term de-leveling itself would mean that all 7th graders are in 7th grade math, and you have very strong students and weak students all in the same classroom, and you would teach all of them. I know in Charlottesville City, they have this thing called honors option, where all kids are in the same room. There isn't a separate honors class, and kids have the opportunity to choose to do extra assignments to be at the honors level. So that's how that's playing out. So that's kind of the definition. What's happening with de-leveling and how it's playing out in the city and the county. And I guess I'd like to talk about, why did we sort and why did we level in the first place? Why did we do all that?
Is that a byproduct of COVID, of the pandemic?
I don't think so. No, I think that was, a goal for the county and the city.
Prior to the pandemic?
Prior to the pandemic, absolutely. Yeah. There's, some thought that part of the gap is created because of leveling, which that's the thought. And, it's not fair. If you look at who's in honors classes, it's mostly white and Asian. And then you have your kind of remedial courses is if you look at racial demographics for those courses, it's, African American and Latino. More they're skewed that direction, right? Not to say that there's not, representation in honors and of African American students and and so forth, but they definitely skew the demographics of those courses. So it's thought that this is part of the issue, and this is partly creating the gap. So, if we just de-level, maybe we'll see better results in terms of, narrowing the gap between different racial groups, in the county.
So de-leveling birthed from the mindset of educational equity?
Correct, yes.
And educational equity is a mindset of let's even the curriculum playing field by de-emphasizing performance?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, and yes. So regardless of your performance, you'd all be in the same room, right? And prior history, right? I mean, it hasn't played out to that extent yet in the county. I mean, there's still honors classes, like I said. I mean, I know the city has this honors option, so everyone's in the same room. Just kids can opt into an honors credit, quote unquote. But yeah, I mean, regardless of prior history or whatever, everyone's just in the same room, and the teacher's kind of expected to teach all kids, and this is the main difficulty. So, the reason why we leveled in the first place, or for a very long time, levels were considered a good thing, was it's actually the easiest way to achieve differentiation. So what do I mean by that? In third grade, there's some kids who can't read.
In third grade?
Second grade, okay. First grade, I mean, they're learning phonics, and there are kids in third grade who can't read. But there's kids that are learning their phonics. We'll put it that way in first grade. And then there's kids who know their phonics and can sound out words and are starting to read, right? And then there's kids that can read, quite well, right? So it makes sense to separate these kids into groups so every kid gets what they need, right? So that you're learning phonics with one group, you're learning, you're progressing in the second group, and the third group is reading books, right? Or reading small things. And it doesn't make sense to put kids that are learning their phonics, right, with kids who are reading, right? They have totally different needs, right? So, and this is played out in many different ways. I like to use the example of, like in my geometry class even, and I don't want to trivialize this, but some kids come in and there's a bunch of figures in geometry, right? So there's like, you look at a shape and has angles coming out of it. It has different measurements, and there's angles and sides, and the figures can be quite complex, right? And some kids really need help, with learning how to read a diagram. And I don't want to trivialize that. That's where they're at, right? They need more time spent going over, okay, this is what this is, and going very slow, and they just or they have algebra skills that are, I don't know, subpar, right? Or addition skills, multiplication skills. I mean, everyone comes to a classroom with a different level, right? And then, to contrast that, of course you have kids that reading the diagram isn't the issue. They can look at it and they can read it, and they have no issue interpreting what the question's asking, based on the diagram, right? So, I just don't feel like either kid is best served by, being in the same room with each other, right? Going back to the phonics and back, up in level to, high school math, right? I mean, these kids have very different needs. And the reality is, in high school, I'm alone in the room. It's me and 20 kids or so, right? And I have to reach every single one of them, do my best to reach every single one of them, right? So you end up teaching to the middle of the room, right? I can only be saying one thing at once. I can be working with 1 to 3 kids, as individuals. I can work with the whole class. I could be talking only one thing at once when I'm working with the whole class. And when I'm working with individuals, I can only work with so many, right? And address their needs. And it's not to say that it's completely different between the different levels, but certainly what I emphasize in the speed of the course is, right? If I have kids that don't need help reading the diagram and have, sufficient algebra skills, I can go way faster and not emphasize those things, right?
That question's coming in from moms. In fact,
Right.
Janice Boyce Trevelyan just asked that. I'm seeing that question asked from Leslie Moore. I'm seeing that question asked from Sally Sherling. How de-leveling is impacting all levels in the same classroom. Do you teach down? Do you teach in the middle and expect the folks on the lower spectrum to rise to the middle? Do you teach at the top of the spectrum and expect the middle and the lower to rise up? How can you possibly teach to all kids? Will some kids get bored? Will some kids get frustrated? How does a teacher cope with this? I'm seeing that all over the comments here.
It's so like they're the kind of what they tell you to do is differentiate, right? To deal with this, because I guess it's inequitable to sort kids, right? So you
Why is it
differentiate.
inequitable to sort kids?
I don't know. I mean,
Because that's life.
I just feel like, I'll be honest. Like, I think it's, again, going back to equity being, three people trying to watch a baseball game, and you give one kid a bigger thing to stand on so he can see over the fence, and the tall kid doesn't need a big thing to stand on because he'd be, way up in the air in that case. I mean, going back to that image of what equity is, like, it doesn't make sense not to sort. Like, we have limited resources, right? I mean, there's only so many teachers. There's only so many student aides, or teacher aides. There's only so much, and like, why not? What's the upshot of? I guess the idea is that, well, the lowest kids will be pulled up by the upper kid. The kids doing really well, but I don't think in practice that works that way. I think, like, in some ways, if you're not receiving instruction that you can understand, it's not helpful to you. You need instruction that you can understand. And then for the kids that that are doing really well or don't need help in particular areas, they get bored. And to answer the question more directly, you teach the middle. Always.
You teach the middle.
Always. That's just how you have to do it. You have to teach the middle, and you're going to leave some kids behind, and you're going to bore some kids, right? And it's just, and you do your best. Absolutely. You always, you try your best with every kid, but it's in particular on the upper end, that gets less served by this, right? They already understand it, so they don't have any questions. It's hard to provide additional material, for a couple kids. They don't want to do it. Like, if you say, hey, there's this great project you can do, and I can't give you extra credit because the grading policy forbids it, but why don't you do this? And, it'd be good for your learning. They say no. At the high school level. Come on. They're not interested in doing extra work. or
Yeah, they're kids.
They're kids.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're the ones that get affected the most.
Katie Pearl watching the program. We've dubbed her the Queen of Whitehall. She routinely participates in the discussion. She says this: I feel like it would be a total confidence killer to be in a class with students that are running circles around me. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is a confidence killer. It's better for kids to, there's always variation in a classroom, but the smaller the variation, the better. I feel like, it's better if most of the class is, needing help with algebra skills, and you don't feel like you're dumb, for needing help. You know what I mean? Like, and this is a real thing. Like, don't kid yourself. There's plenty of kids that come to geometry with poor algebra skills, and I want to help them. Everyone wants to help them, and I'm glad they're in my class. I'm not saying they shouldn't be in my class or anything like that. I'm glad to have them. I just want to be able to help them. And if if I have a class where that's clearly the case, where, like, I have, my middle needs help with algebra skills, right? Then I can teach to that and help every kid, right? And same thing with reading the diagram. That's not a trivial thing in geometry. Let me tell you. You see some of these figures. These can be tough for some kids, and some kids are easy, and it's not anyone's fault. You know?
This question's come in for you, and I'll refine the question a little bit. And viewers and listeners, parents, please ask questions. Happy to relay them on air. Lee Elberson on LinkedIn. We'll get to your comments here in a matter of moments. Who is leading the educational equity charge within ACPS?
Gosh, I mean, probably Haas. I mean,
That's the superintendent.
yeah, the superintendent. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's it's a lot. I mean, there's been I don't know, you know, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's mostly Haas. I mean, I think
This is the politics of education here.
yeah, right. Yeah, this is the politics of education. I mean, I think like I get what they're trying to say, you know, like you know, there's underrepresentation of certain groups in honors classes, you know, and no one likes that. Like, you know, like this is clearly an issue. I mean, but to solve it by kind of saying, well, these levels don't exist. I mean, I don't know. That's just like there's no such thing as merit. I mean, really? You don't think so? I mean, I don't buy that. You know, I don't buy I don't buy that at all. And you know, kids come to the classroom with, you know, in kindergarten with widely different skills, and they come to third grade with widely different skills, and they come to geometry in high school with widely different skills. And you know, I mean, we should be focused on helping the kid, you know, and it helps to sort. I'm just being honest. I really feel like it helps to sort.
You got a local private school live streaming the interview in the teacher's lounge right now.
Wow.
Watching you here, Bill.
Wow.
This is, I guess that's the essence of what we need to talk about.
All right.
If educational equity leads to de-leveling, and de-leveling leads to perhaps a watered-down curriculum that is more that has a foundation based on inclusion as opposed to merit.
Right.
The chicken and egg would suggest that we need to start with the educational equity piece because it's creating the other layers of the onion here. Educational equity, de-leveling, inclusion, not merit in the classroom. Is the educational equity something that's in vogue? Or is the educational equity the future of public school education?
I mean, we live in a progressive area, right?
We do.
So, I mean, you know, and our gap is wider here than it is in surrounding counties historically. And you know, the gap between the black-white gap in achievement, it's higher than the national average. You know, and so there's, I mean, rightly so, there's a lot of pressure put on leadership to address these issues, right? But just to say, that's not unlike many rich college towns.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Rich college towns across America have wider gaps. And it's, you know, Berkeley is notorious, right? I mean, you know, in California, I'm from California, so I know more, something about that. But yeah, I mean, across America, rich college towns have higher gaps. I mean, it's not a factor about necessarily, you know, yeah, I mean, because there's some students that just do really well, right? So you have that in the pool as well. So, yeah, I mean, but regardless, there's still a lot of pressure placed to narrow that gap, and rightly so. I mean, no one likes this. Like, you know, everyone wants there to be, you know, achievement that's equal. But I don't like. You know, we've been trying it for a very long time. There's data going back on this for 40 years. There doesn't seem to be a policy on the school level that seems to you know, narrow the gap. And it's, you know, it's a wider societal issue, right? That's trying to be solved in the schools. You know, we haven't been successful yet, obviously. I mean, if anyone knew how to solve it, I'm sure we'd solve it. I don't feel like this de-leveling is gonna solve the issue. I mean, I just
It sets kids up for failure when
I
it
feel
comes
it
to
does.
real life, where it's a Darwinistic dog-eat-world society.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go into an employer, the employer's going to expect performance, and if you don't deliver performance, you don't stay in the job.
Right.
And that's just real life. This is a good question from Lee Elberson. He's the CEO of Claiborne Education. He joined us last week. The interview we did with Lee, in a lot of ways, was inspired by your interview. And I've heard that from a number of people. He says, is it possible that we have not given de-leveling enough time to see the benefit?
I mean, sure. I mean, well, no, things were tried back in the 80s too. I mean, in the 90s, you know, this hasn't been, you know, school districts have embraced it and tried it in other places. I mean, it's hard to say that it's, so one place that was successful with it pumped a lot of money into the system. I mean, a lot of money into tutoring and more aides in the classroom, especially at elementary levels. And they had some good results at that level. I'm not so sure about the high school level. Anyone having good results with, you know, de-leveling at that level. I have to look into it more, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, at the elementary level, there was a particular school district that had some success with it. But again, they had lots of money to throw at the problem too, which is good. I mean, you know, that's good. Maybe that would help. I'm not so sure. I just don't think, given the resources of Albemarle High School, given that I am a solo teacher in a room, and you know, the kind of widely different levels kids come to geometry with or algebra 2 with, it's helpful in that situation. I can only speak to that, really. And I've had, you know, classrooms where you have wide differentiation of ability coming in, and it's hard. You get pulled in many directions. And again, I feel like there's always kids I'm not serving, you know, with every lecture. So you know, more time's always good. I mean, I think there's this feeling, like anytime you change the system, it creates some chaos, right? And you know, rapid change doesn't seem to benefit anyone, right? And I'm kind of doubtful that, well, we'll see. I mean, you know, so hopefully, you know, over time, you know, it could be of help. I'm not so sure, though.
This is a question, a
Yeah.
comment that's come in. Jerry, please don't use my name. I enjoyed chatting with you over Halloween. As you know, we have a son in the Covenant School and a son at the Charlottesville Catholic School. One of the reasons we pulled our boys out of Albemarle County Public Schools was the topic you're chatting right now. We noticed that our boys who are overachievers, but they need a kick in the pants to overachieve, were not receiving that motivational push because they could coast by in the classroom. We got to the root of the problem and realized that they were bored in the classroom. And often why they were bored in the classroom was because their teachers, to no fault of their own, were teaching to a wide base of intellectual levels in one classroom. Can you ask your guest if this topic matter, I believe he called it de-leveling, yes it is de-leveling, is leading to teachers choosing different professional paths, and one of the motivational factors, like my family, of going into private schools and paying for education? That's a great question.
That's in terms of teachers choosing different educational paths. Professional paths. I don't know. You know, there's a lot of teachers that are definitely, you know, love the profession and want to stay in it, you know, and do their best given any circumstance, right? So I could see it definitely being a consideration for parents. I mean, if you're feeling that your student isn't being challenged enough and you don't see a future pathway for them to be challenged more, I think, you know, you have to do something about it, right? So I could see, you know, that being a reason to pull out of the public schools, which is a total shame. It's a total shame. I mean, it's. I guess I would maybe transition the conversation to Mesa program. And
Jeff Perlman is big a part of that. Mr. Perlman's come on the show in the past. There's been a little bit more of a lockdown on ACPS employees when it comes to doing media interviews.
Right, I bet.
By the superintendent's office with the most recent media around this semester. But tremendous respect this network has for Jeff Perlman. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem. So when I joined ACPS in 2019, I met Bill Daly and some of the other Mesa teachers. Mesa is the Math Engineering Science Academy that was, based in Alamo High School, and there was a couple other academies that were based in the other high schools as well. Back in 2019, it was a merit-based application process to get into the program. It consisted of teacher recommendations, a test, and and prior performance in math classes to get into the Mesa program itself. And some of the brightest kids, were in that class, and hardworking, brightest kids. I was so impressed with Bill Daly's curriculum. He was looking at his material. It was leaps ahead of what I would have taught even in an honors algebra 2 class. Just because the sorting was so good that he could target that level of kid to such a degree, right? So you have very strong kids in that class, so he can fly with them, and you give them some work, they'll do it. Those kids were really really dedicated to their own education, and smart besides, right? So unfortunately, back in, I think, 2020, they stopped the application process and made it into a, is this correct, Jerry? Stopped the application process and made it into a lottery.
That's right.
And
in fact, we had Kelly Jackson on the show. I believe Kelly is watching now. Her daughter is second year in Mesa, and the first year that she was in, it was based on KPIs, key performance indicators. The second year, it is a lottery system. And interestingly, in the Monticello Mesa program, there were students that were from other schools. The interesting aspect is they chose to get involved with Mesa, not necessarily because of the curriculum, but instead because they didn't want to go to school at that respective location.
Interesting.
So that was the gamesmanship, if you may, of playing the game.
Right. Yeah.
See what I'm saying with that?
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's supposed to be a place for at least the Math Engineering Science Academy for kids who really like math, who want to and science and want to progress in that as a career, right? So they changed it, and then there was some watering down, right, of what could be expected of kids, right? And you have students that are in the class that probably can't keep up to what was before, right? Because, it's a lottery system now. So, no thought really goes into who's getting in. It's just, luck of the draw. The curriculum got watered down, and still, there wasn't, equal performance of kids in it, so they've decided to shut it down completely, right? It's a true travesty, in my opinion. This program took years to get going, years, and Bill Daly is left over it. One of the best math teachers I've ever met, really, just an excellent teacher. And he's moved on. He's going. He's up in Northern Virginia now, And it's just so sad. I don't know what, like, the thing is, we have the resources, right? In Albemarle County, we have the resources to have a program like this, right? And it's not affecting other kids negatively to have this program. It's just not. It benefits the kids that are in it immensely because they're challenged. I mean, it can be really tough in a public school setting for certain kids to be challenged, right? Especially if they're going to be put in a room, with anyone. And it becomes very hard for the teacher to challenge some of those top kids because, again, I could say, hey, there's this great project you can do, and if I'm not expecting every single kid to do it, they're not going to do it.
No.
I mean, it's not fair, know, and kids are very, in on that. They know what's fair. They don't feel they should be expected to do something not everyone's expected to do, right? And they don't care that they're really smart or whatever or really capable. They don't want to do it. I mean, maybe there's some rare exceptions, but so it's really helpful to group those kids together and
because they compete.
They compete with each other,
yeah.
And you can throw anything at them. Like, seriously, like, he had questions that, like, I had difficulty solving. I mean, I've been teaching for a long time. I mean, like, they were not routine math questions, and they were getting at the heart of what's happening in a quadratic, maybe, or an absolute value function, and it's not appropriate for every kid. Like, I'm just being, this type of learning is not appropriate for every kid. It's just not.
Questions are coming in fast here.
Yeah.
Comments coming in fast. Does Bill think that the family resources, time and money are a deciding factor for student outcomes? If yes, then how much can ACPS realistically accomplish without additional funding to bridge the achievement gap?
I mean, SES, social economic status, is the main determining factor of student outcomes. I mean, there's one study, what was it? 1960s study who measured the overall impact of schools themselves on student achievement, the administration, the teachers, versus, and with all the different variables that determines student achievement. It's something like 10 to 20% of outcome is just the entire school apparatus itself, right? It's not the main thing, right? Parents and the environment that the kid comes from is, for better or for worse, it seems to be, and all of our research indicates that it does seem to be the main factor in student outcomes. And yeah, the Bill Gates Foundations, for instance, put tons of money into improving education, right? And, up and down, curriculum, more support for at-risk students, all the money, right? And unfortunately, after a couple years, they're a results-driven group. They wanted to say, well, we spent all this money. What was the results of all this? And surprisingly little, right? Which is, no one likes this. It's a sad reality. And we want it to make a difference. And we do. I mean, teachers do. Not to say we don't, but in terms of closing gaps, it's tough. It's really tough.
This is from a mom with a student in St. Anne's Belfield. And then I'll get to these direct messages that have come in. We appreciate Bill's time on the show and the honesty he has shown. This is why we pulled our oldest from a middle school in ACPS and put him at St. Anne's. We understand that we have means, and we understand that we have an advantage that others do not, and we don't take this lightly. And we try to reinforce this with our son every day he heads to St. Anne's by encouraging him to do as well as he possibly can in the school and to pay attention, because the tuition impacts our bottom line. Then she adds this: if the majority of teachers are opposed to educational equity, and it sounds like many are, what can teachers do to change the course of this curriculum? This is maybe the segue into the collective bargaining.
Yeah,
and the
I mean,
teacher
that
union,
was
which
such
was
a
huge for you.
Oh yeah, I mean that was part of one of the reasons. Like I was like, oh my gosh, they don't want to change. I mean, yeah. So like Jerry was mentioning with collective bargaining, right now, basically, each teacher at Albemarle County has an individual contract with the the county to teach, and I don't know. There is a lot of fear among teachers to speak out about how they feel, and real repercussions have happened if
very few are speaking out. In fact, I'll highlight, because I noticed that I've been following this closely. Beth Saxon speaks out constantly. She's a union leader. Mary McIntyre is a union leader. But I've noticed fear amongst ranks to lead this charge, and perhaps that fear is being utilized to de-incentivize or to minimize momentum behind collective bargaining and unionization. I've said this on the show, and a lot of people have tried to peg me with one political party or another, and what I'm about to say now often catches people off guard, but I'm a big proponent of ACPS teachers and collective bargaining and unionizing, because currently right now the teachers in this splintered fashion or this lack of power in numbers, one voice at the bargaining table, is impacting volume of teachers in the classroom, meaning the number of teachers that stay on the job. It's impacting experienced teachers staying on the job, and frankly speaking, could be one of the reasons why educational equity is so proponent right now in our classrooms when many are opposed to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the end, I mean, this is a progressive board and a seemingly progressive superintendent.
You're talking school board.
School board, and seemingly progressive superintendent, and they both said no. How? Well, they don't want to share power. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. They don't want another voice at the table. And that would require the union to have a strong leader, and that would speak up for, teachers, but still they didn't want another voice at the table. And I think it's to the benefit of students in particular that teachers have a voice. So that,
and maybe the parents.
And the parents, absolutely, because I mean, we've been doing this a long time. A lot of teachers have, right? And the profession itself has been doing it a long time, right? And to just not take our concerns, to heart when we bring these things up, it's terrible. I mean, what do you think? It's just it's so sad to me.
Why do you get emotional there? And see how much he cares, guys. No, absolutely. You see, I'm getting emotional too. Do you see how much he cares? Do you see how much he cares? This guy spent 12 years in public schools, and in a lot of ways retired because of this collective bargaining issue. This is how much this man cares, and how much of a loss it is for the community that he's not teaching our children.
It's to say that the way things have been done for a very long time leads to these inequalities, I just think is flat out incorrect. And the amount that teachers have to take on, to do their job well, it's a lot, right? So I just feel we need a voice at the table. Like, it's just, we're the ones on the front teaching the kids, not anyone downtown. They don't know what's going on. They should trust us enough that if we bring up some concerns, they don't sideline us or say, oh no, or whatever, like it's, and I felt sidelined. I felt completely sidelined. I felt that, you're just some dumb teacher who doesn't know what they're talking about when I brought up my concerns about changing the grading policy.
Well, you wrote the letter. I remember from the first interview, you wrote the letter and you were told by your superior that if you don't like this, find another career.
That's exactly what, I mean, in a couple of steps away, but yes, that was it. Not directly, it was in a meeting, but yeah. I mean, okay. So, I have, and it's time to move on, but I just it's too bad, that why isn't teachers' opinions valued? It's a question,
Why are teachers marginalized?
Yeah.
Why are teachers, this is the thing that frustrates me the most of teachers.
Yeah.
Frustrates me the most with how society views teachers. How many times do we make this statement, oh, they have 2.5 months off a year, they're paid enough? I mean, that's just, from my standpoint, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can't think of a better description than that. It's the marginalization of people that mold the next generation of society. And if we're not careful, we're going to have a next generation of society that pursues being TikTok stars as opposed to actually pursuing careers that have merit and matter and drive society forward. I don't understand that. How often did you feel marginalized as a teacher by society?
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, teachers, public school teachers or teachers in general aren't considered intellectuals. They're not, I don't know.
I don't get that.
It's something. I don't know. I mean,
the phrase that is the most disingenuous, aggravating, frustrating is, what is the phrase? Those who can't teach. That is just ridiculous. Like, I don't understand how our frontline teachers, I said this the last time, police, EMTs, the people literally that are like saving our lives, protecting our lives, and teaching the next generation of people aren't some of the most highest paid in society.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, it's odd. I think it's certainly in Albemarle County, teachers need to be paid more. I mean, it's a hard market here. Hard to own a house. As a teacher, it's hard to and so forth. And I mean, they need a lot of us. I mean, that's for sure. So that's one. There's a scalability question, I suppose. But yeah, I was talking to other teachers, and it's not just the pay that's so upsetting about not having a union. It's really the feeling that we're not being heard. That's and all the blame. It's like if something goes wrong in your class, or some kid's not doing well, it's your fault. And it's that's hard. That's hard. It doesn't feel supportive. I had a teacher friend. I'm not going to use her name, but she's teaching algebra, 9th grade algebra, and gets called down all the time to talk to, her administrator, and she doesn't feel supported. She feels like...
Why is that? Because of classroom performance?
Yeah, because of class performance, what kids are saying about her, like, her teaching style, quote unquote. She's been teaching 25 years at least. I don't know how long she's been teaching. She's been teaching a long time, and she's an excellent, excellent teacher. And that's... she needs support. She doesn't need to be told what she's doing right or wrong. She just needs support.
You mentioned superintendent and school board leading the charge to prevent, to keep this unionization effort from happening. This is another thing that I find perplexing and aggravating.
Yeah.
As a parent of a rising kindergartner, someone who lives in Albemarle County and understands, like you, is a leader in the community who has a voice, a platform. Charlottesville City Schools, take the bus driver thing, beat Albemarle County Public Schools with starting wages for bus drivers. Albemarle County Public Schools were months, literally, behind the raising of starting pay for bus drivers versus Charlottesville City Schools. And the only difference between these two school systems is an invisible line that no one even knows. In fact, you can make a legitimate argument that the quality of life for a bus driver in Charlottesville City Schools is better because they have less territory to cover, 10.2 square miles, where Albemarle County is a vast territory where a lot of the bus drivers have to take back winding roads, mountainous roads that are more difficult to ride.
In the rain and
everything. Okay? So ACPS bus drivers is harder than CCS bus drivers, yet school board was slower to give starting pay for bus drivers when compared to Charlottesville City Schools. Take it a step further. Charlottesville City Schools have a union with their teachers.
Great.
Literally, they have a union. There's an invisible line that no one really even knows where it is. CCS has this union. ACPS doesn't have this union. And still the school board and the superintendent believe that not having the union is way to go. And I'm a free enterprise guy.
Yeah.
I'm a free market guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as someone who's a free market guy, very libertarian in his thoughts, it's so obvious to me that you guys have to have a union for collective bargaining purposes, because if this doesn't happen, more teachers are going to quit because they don't have a seat at the table or a say of what's going on. The quality of life is going to continue to suffer. The curriculum is going to continue to suffer. And really, the power is going to be siloed amongst a few people. And as power is siloed amongst a few people, absolute power ends up corrupting.
It does.
And that's what we have here.
And you get a bunch of yes men around you.
You get yes men.
Yeah, that's it.
And then you get prioritization. And I'm sorry, I'll get off this soap. You get prioritization of pomp and circumstance, like, I'm choosing my words now very carefully, okay? You get prioritization of stuff that doesn't straight up impact the classroom.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. We have to hold it accountable, right? I mean, that's it.
Right.
Like, we're the ones. So, I mean, and hopefully.
But how do the teachers do that?
I mean, it's like I said, I brought up my concerns, right? And, a mandatory meeting was scheduled for the entire department, and, no solutions were given to our concerns. And then we were told if we don't like it, we can leave. I mean, I'm paraphrasing big time here, but that's kind of the gist. Our concerns were not addressed. And, okay. So that's where things are, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can write more letters, I suppose. I left. I mean, that's one thing I could do.
Is your quality of life better?
Well, I've lost about 28 pounds since I've left. I mean, I don't know.
That's true?
Yes, it is.
You've lost 28 pounds?
Yes, I have.
Was that stress eating?
Partly. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot going on. I won't say it's just that, but it's.
I noticed on your Facebook page you're taking fantastic hikes with your beautiful wife.
Absolutely.
And your friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just passed and earned. I don't have the exact language here. A certificate or a curriculum in software development. Is that right?
Exactly, for software development. Exactly. I'm looking into ed tech companies. We'll see what happens.
He's looking for a job now. For all those that are watching here, this is a very qualified candidate.
We'll see. Yeah. But yeah, I mean.
Do you miss it?
I do. I absolutely miss the
daily
kids.
Miss it?
No. I don't daily miss it. I miss the kids. I don't miss all the stress. There's a lot of stress in teaching, that's great too. I mean, that keeps you alive, right? You know, having hard things to do keeps you alive.
Would it be less stressful for the teacher if there was a union?
I guess it depends on how the union paid out. So yeah, I mean, okay. So in Los Angeles Unified School District, I taught there for 2 years, and we had a union, and the little things are off your plate. So we didn't have lunch duty. We didn't have to cover classes without pay. We any extra meetings, there was a certain amount of meetings that administration could schedule, you know, in a month. Anything after than that we got paid for. If they wanted us to cover a class, we got time and a half. I mean, these are like, you have people jumping to cover a classroom if you're getting time and a half. Let me tell you, if you're not getting paid, it's a total chore, and then they have to, you know. So
which is like any job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was better. I mean, in terms of those little stressors, you know, not having to give up your lunch. I mean, if you have to give up your lunch to do lunch duty, when do you get a break? I mean, your planning is your break? I don't think so. Your planning is your planning, you know, and that shouldn't be encumbered either with meetings. And again, it wasn't encumbered when we had the union, you know, in Los Angeles in that case. So yeah, I think it removes. It lets you focus on teaching. It lets you focus on planning for your lessons and teaching, because all the other little duties that get assigned to teachers, you know, aren't there. Or if they're there, you get paid for it. Fine, you know. So, yeah, I mean, yeah. So I think it would help. You know, a good contract where things like I just mentioned are present. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would help stress overall.
Why is it a 1-year contract?
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, it gives them more power.
That's
right?
why.
Yeah, I mean, it gives them more power.
It's leverage.
Yeah, it's leverage. Yeah. Yeah, it just gives them more power. Yeah, that's definitely odd in many ways, right? Most professions you get hired, right? Like,
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
It's further the marginalization of the teacher.
You don't sign a contract every year, right? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of.
I mean, basically, how the contract goes is every year we're going to determine whether or not we're going to keep your job.
Yep, pretty much.
That's leverage.
That is. I mean, in the current climate, they're going to have. It's tough to get rid of teachers, right? But like, there's just not enough of them. They need people to fill the spots.
That's why I've made this comment like in the past here, and I'll get to comments here coming in.
Yeah.
Does the teacher have more leverage over the machine than ever before than right now?
Probably, yeah.
Like right now,
probably.
Has more leverage over the machine and the administration and the institution we call educational leadership. Teachers have more leverage than ever before.
I think, and I still, you know,
because less people are getting into the profession.
Oh, for sure, and they should start listening to teachers more. They really should, but you know. So there, I don't know what you can do like on a policy level, right? So, you know, my policy concerns went unaddressed, and that policy, like, it goes down to the systems of our grade book. Like, we literally could not give a less than a 50. You know, we literally could not put that in the grade book. You know.
Which is BS.
Yeah. Well,
which encourages.
Yeah.
Coasting.
Oh, it absolutely does. It was such a
encourages gaming the system.
Absolutely.
I do that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, just give me the 50, mister. It was literally told to me, just give me the 50. Okay, so an entire unit you're going to skip?
I mean, some people would say C is for degree.
That absolutely, or D's.
D's for degree.
That's for sure.
D gets a degree.
That it does. It does. You get out of high school. I mean, you know, and for some kids, it's not, they don't have the executive function. Let's be honest. To see outside of this, you know, outside of that, you know, a week, even for, you know, adults, long-term planning's tough. You know, as a teenager, come on. Like, you know, they don't have the executive function to see how important this is. It's so important. And they don't have a parent at home to help guide them. It's tough. Yeah, I mean,
can't blame them.
No, so you have to rely on teachers to guide them, right? And then teachers need things to back it up, just like parents do. Parents need ways they can influence their kids, right? They have them. I know you take it away from a teacher, what do you have left?
Well, I think in the first show you called it your charm and your personality.
Yeah, that's what you got, which is something. I mean, that's not nothing. But
yeah, you're a charming guy.
But it's not everything, and for some kids, they need to see the consequences of things. Like you're going to fail unless you do this test. Versus, I still have a C after getting the 50. Like what does a 0 do to your grade versus a 50? it's
hugely impactful.
It's hugely impactful.
Yeah.
You miss one test, you're down a level. Absolutely, getting a 50 it barely affects you.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Straightforward question.
Yeah.
Is administrative leadership pushing the de-leveling of performance to protect jobs downtown?
Yeah, I think it's kind of changed. One of the bigger metrics on school success is just graduation rates versus raw achievement. And it's easy to influence graduation rates if you
can't get below a 50.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that pretty much guarantees graduation.
Pretty much.
It doesn't guarantee,
it doesn't.
Because if people don't show up, they can get below a 50. But I've also been told from a number of, and you have a boatload of teachers watching you here. Mm-hmm. I've also been told by a boatload of teachers that even the truancy and attendance records are being. You ever watched the show on HBO called The Wire?
I have, yes.
Juking the stats.
Yep.
Remember that phrase from The Wire?
Yep.
I've been told that truancy and tardies have been juking the stats.
Oh yeah. No, for sure. I mean, yeah. So in terms of when a student is marked absent, if they show up at any time to your room, you're supposed to mark them present, even if they're 50 minutes late, which wasn't the case before. So a kid's not truant unless they have unexcused absences. So the second they become excused for any reason, basically, they're not truant anymore. So that's a fairly easy one to do, right? You get some excuse, and then all those unexcused absences become excused absences. You don't have a truant kid, right? We saw, especially during 2019, 2020, where we were fully virtual, we saw kids just fall off the map, But if they interacted with the room at all, this is during virtual, had any type of, contact with you were supposed to mark them present for the entire week. But, yeah, that was a weird time for sure. But, yeah, I don't know. How much time do we have left?
We got as much time as you want, but I understand you may have a hard stop. It's 1:30, so we're already an hour and 4 minutes in. How about can we go 15 more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. 15? I did want to talk about relative results from 2019 to 2022 of Albemarle County versus national.
Please, let's go there. Let's go there. Set the stage for us.
Yes, absolutely. So there's something called the National Assessment for Educational Progress. It's the NAEP test, and that's administered on the state level every 2 years for one of them and every 4 years for another. One's a long-term trend assessment. The other is called the main NAEP. It measures, it's trying to measure educational progress in the U.S. And it's the same test given to every single state and all over the U.S. It started in 1969. So that's a kind of a snapshot of how states are doing on the educational front, and it really just compares states to states. So there's another kind of body of research that I'm familiar with, a guy named Sean Reardon out of Stanford, so just to take a step back, every single public school tests, right? Tests in Virginia look different than tests in Kentucky, right? They're different tests. what is proficient for a third grade math test in Virginia is different than Kentucky. What ACPS calls proficient might be different because now they're talking about growth standards or something like that.
They're different baselines.
It's different baselines.
Yeah.
But every year this is done, and all across the nation. So it's a huge body of data, right? Which is great, but hasn't been able to be tapped necessarily because tests change all the time and different states use different tests, right? But what he's done is use statistical, he has the NAEP, which is given to every single state. So he can kind of make a guess of what proficiency means in Kentucky versus Virginia versus Illinois, all the different states. He can have that. And then he's able to normalize, district level tests. So you can get his map is quite impressive. You can get long-term testing data on a national scale on basically every single district in the U.S. And he's got a little map, interactive map that you can click on and look at different data from going across time plus on the district level, right? Because again, NAEP you don't have that ability because it's just state level, right? Using that, I looked up ACPS, performance in 2019 versus 2022. So in 2019, students were performing 1.15 grade levels ahead of the national average on math. So that would mean like your third grader in ACPS on average was performing like a fourth grader compared to the national average, which is quite good. I mean, to be honest, that is
That's
very
awesome.
impressive. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
A whole grade level ahead, right? And in reading, it was 0.71 grade level, so 3/4 of a grade level roughly. So 3/4 of a year ahead, students at ACPS. And in 2022, ACPS students performed at negative 0.14 grade levels. So they went
in math?
in math and 0.13 grade levels better than the national average in reading. So we went from being ahead a year pre-pandemic to losing, 1.29 grade levels of, in math. This is a terrible drop. So the national average for learning loss over that same period was half a grade level in math and 0.33 grade levels in reading and in English. So we're outsizing that by over double.
And the concerning aspect to further concern this is the amount spent per pupil in stacked up against other schools in the Commonwealth.
Yes.
We are one of the top schools,
higher spenders.
top 10% in the Commonwealth spending per pupil.
Exactly. And we had this incredible drop in performance, an incredible drop over these 3 years, outpacing, the national average, state averages. And they've tried to massage this data, using their growth metrics or whatever the heck, comparing 2021 data to 2022 data. That's what they compared on the official release from the city, from the county. But if you look at it, from 2019 to 2022, and you compare it to national averages, it's a crazy drop. And part of Reardon's research showed that yes, school districts that shut down had worse results, right? And school districts that are high poverty areas also had bigger drops. We're not a high poverty area though, and we didn't shut down the entire time. So it's quite a drop if you consider those two factors. We went hybrid for, part of it, right? Whereas like schools in California shut down the entire year,
So what do you attribute that to?
Oof. There's so much, right, for all these things. But just to say, I wanted to look into it and see, well, how there was a lot of change, right, going into the pandemic. There was a lot of change, a lot of policy change. Grading, behavioral, suspensions, things like that. Lots of change. And, we should be at least in line with state, right? In terms of our learning loss. Every single district experienced learning loss. I mean, that's not, obviously, even districts who did not shut down experience some learning loss. Parents are going nuts, they're losing jobs, the general uncertainty of the community, all that stuff kind of has an effect on students' achievement, right? So, but the amount of learning loss, experienced in this county is just, I couldn't believe it. So, I mean, it's hard
especially
to
considering other school systems across the country experience the same circumstances.
Yes.
Hybrid, quarantine,
Yes.
COVID collateral damage, screen time, learning at home.
Yeah.
So it was not unique to ACPS.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, and maybe we could be on the higher end of like half a grade. Maybe we say maybe we're 0.6, whatever, but double the national average in learning loss, or over double. Oof.
So we got Lee Elberson watching the program as the
Yeah.
solutions guy.
Yeah.
How do you solve this?
Oof.
I have some
I think-
ideas. You go.
Well, I think they added additional chaos into the system by changing policies so abruptly. I think the kind of lax mentality we had with greeting kids back to school last year contributed to this definitely. And starting, shifting mentality. We've changed our mentality from achievement, and a focus on, learning outcomes to something else, right? We're not as concerned about that anymore. We're more concerned with other things. And I don't think that helps anyone. Like, as we see with our Black student results, they were abysmal. So anyway, what was your viewer?
Well, he wants us to focus on solutions.
Right.
So some of the solutions that I had was, as Neil Williamson, who's the president of the Free Enterprise Forum, says, elections matter. We have 4 spots on the school board that are up for re-election in a year. Those 4 spots are the Scottsville District, Rivanna District, Whitehall District, and the at-large seat. Those 4 spots that are up for election in a year represent control of a 7-person board.
Absolutely.
That's a starting point there.
Absolutely.
I think another aspect that we can do from a solution standpoint is what I've been trying to do is hold Dr. Haas and his cabinet accountable. One of the few factors in life more influential is a galvanized populace.
Absolutely.
And trying to galvanize the populace, motivate the populace to encourage change and accountability. That's a solution. I think a third solution is explaining to the populace and the school board and the administration the true need for collective bargaining and a union within ACPS. Let's cut to the chase. Charlottesville Public Schools have a union, and it's just a matter of time where Charlottesville Public Schools and its union utilize the power of collective bargaining to improve the conditions of teachers in their hallways. And when that happens, it's going to be the same thing. The bus driver thing was the microcosm.
Right.
More teachers are going to go to CPS, Charlottesville Public Schools, because they're going to get more perks, more pays, and better bennies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when that happens, Albemarle's going to suffer.
Yep.
The teachers are going to leave. They're going to go across an invisible line. Some cases, that invisible line and their new place of employment may be actually closer to their home than where they're currently teaching at ACPS. For so long, teachers pursued ACPS as a professional path because Albemarle was seen as the gravy train for public schools in Central Virginia.
Yeah.
It was where the wealthy kids were that had the support at home with their parents. And for some reason, I still think the wealthy kids are there who have support with their
Absolutely.
parents, but the quality of life thing has changed. Oftentimes, CPS got the label of challenging classroom setting.
Yeah. That's
And maybe it's
Why?
changed. Why
That's
has it
crazy.
changed? Now you hear about some of the stuff in the Albemarle High School, and it's like the Wild West. And interestingly, the PR ploy or the PR play by the principal and the administration was to downplay the beef and the issues.
yeah.
As
Absolutely.
opposed to say, yes, we have these problems and here's how we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example was like the email sent out by the Albemarle principal a handful of days after the hazing incident in the locker room. And the email that was sent to the parents was basically everything's fine.
Right.
When 3 or 4 days beforehand, you had the hazing incident in the locker room. And we don't need to go down that train, but like it just seemed extremely out of touch is what it seemed.
Yeah.
It seemed out of touch.
He's not going to acknowledge it. I mean,
Right.
How do you do it though? I don't know. How do you acknowledge it?
I think you got to just own it.
Yeah, I think so too. Is it business as usual after that? You know, I maybe.
Could it be? How could it be?
How could it be? You know. Hopefully not. Hopefully they kind of see that the problems of last year are carrying over. You know, and I mean this is a big issue. I mean, you know, all the chaos. It's still there, obviously.
3 questions for you.
Yeah.
In the interview, you're amazing. Like I sent this tweet yesterday, and I was watching an interview or a clip where Larry King was interviewing Jerry Seinfeld, and I highlighted that Larry King understood the essence of an interview was to allow the guest to be the show, and then I said, as an interviewer, it's extremely difficult to allow the guest to be a show because not all guests have that skill set. Right. You do.
Right.
You do. Well, you have that skill set. 3 questions left. One from Paul MacArthur, lives in Southside Charlottesville, Avon Extended. I've highlighted that I think he should run for school board in the Scottsville district. Please, Paul. He's got 2 daughters in ACPS. He asked this question: what does Bill think about converting to a permanent 4-day school week like we had during COVID that gives the teachers all Friday off for planning, training, grading, and just catching their breath?
I don't think it's best for the kids. I'll be honest. I think 5 days a week is fine. I think it's tough. A lot of learning happens over time, right? So like you encounter a difficult thing in math, right? And I don't want to squeeze more into my time, my day, right? It gives me way less days. So I want more days to spread over my content as a math teacher, because I want to chunk it in small bits as I can, right? Because if I give too much, and that would force me to give more than I'd want to, you know, and even more than I'd want to. I think 5 days a week, you see every teacher every day for a math teacher is ideal, because you can do smaller chunks. They have time to go home and practice and think about it, and come the next day and have another small chunk where I have to combine with this block schedule. I have to combine 2 days into one, basically, right? And it's I think it's worse for their brains. So and their learning. So I think, you know, from a student perspective and outcomes perspective, you know, 5 days a week. Yeah.
Good answer, and also important to emphasize, Paul, from a socioeconomic standpoint, many of the students that are financially disadvantaged are counting on the 5 days a week, not only for meals, food,
for sure,
but for supervision when perhaps that's not there in the household. Second to last question. This one's from LinkedIn. Specifically, what policies, if Bill was in charge, would he change at Albemarle County Public Schools?
Oof. Gosh, I'm glad I'm not in charge. It's such a responsibility. I mean, oh man, gosh, I don't believe in this new grading policy. I'd revert that. I would revert the notion that leveling harms kids. You know, I think it's good to sort, you know, and pursue that. You know, and I would. I guess I'd try to put it back to normal. I don't know. Maybe that's just not a great answer, but I just don't see the benefit in all these change. I'd want researched, you know, methods to try to address this, which I don't feel like there's been sufficient research for these grading changes or deleveling on a real basis. I mean, unfortunately, education is very fad driven. And there's not enough research into it. Just my opinion. So,
last question from yours truly: would you and your wife enroll your student in Albemarle, your child in Albemarle County Public Schools right now?
Right now, yes.
You would.
I mean, they'd be
in elementary school, middle school, and high school.
We would. I think so. Gosh. I don't know. I mean, we don't have a kid yet, and that's a number of years off. We'd elementary for sure. Maybe not. It depends. I don't know. Gosh, in high school, I haven't given it much thought, and we haven't discussed it. I'm just being honest. Gosh, right now, I really believe in public schools.
I know you do. That's why this is a tough question for you to answer.
I really want them to work, and I also know that the most important thing is, at home, and Megan and I will provide a good environment for our kids to be able to learn, and, I can bridge a lot of gaps, and so can she. So, and I really am a believer in public schools, and I want them to be the best they can be. So I think I'd prefer public schools. Yeah.
Elementary, middle, and high school.
I think so. But that's, I'm not there yet, and we're not faced with those realities or having to make that decision. I'll just leave it there.
Fair. And then anything you would like to close with?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on again, Jerry.
We love having you on.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. And I appreciate being here. I appreciate being able to talk about these things. And I've spent years thinking about these things. Really, I have, very deeply. And I'm glad to finally be able to share it. So thanks again for having me on.
It was our pleasure. Yeah. It was our pleasure. This guy is a rock star. The interview... I'm seeing dozens of these comments. Where can we watch it from start to finish? We'll archive it on ilovecville.com. Also, it's on every social media platform and wherever you get your podcasts. Bill is A+ guy. I will continue to respectfully and persistently pester him with his inbox about getting him back on the show. I think he's just honest. He's a real dude. And I think people respect that authenticity. Bill's A+, Judah Wickower is our director. This is the I Love CVille show, where it's just long-form content. And we can take deep dives because of that long-form content and no commercial breaks. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30 on a Thursday. Guys, take care. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.